Picture this. A 70 million euro jet is suddenly grounded during a random ramp inspection. The fines are stacking up, the passengers are furious, and the aviation authority is demanding a name. Who legally takes the bullet? The mechanic who signed off the daily check, the airline leasing the jet, or the owner sitting in a boardroom 1,000 miles away? If you think you know exactly who is responsible, the regulations might just surprise you.
Welcome to another episode of Mastering EASA Part-M from Phoenix Way Academy, powered by Avinix Group. Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, and I'm Sam.
In this episode, we will cover Subpart, a general M.A.101 scope.
Yeah, so if you are joining us today, we're really taking a deep dive into Section A, Subparts A and B. And, this is essentially a journey into accountability.
Right, exactly. We are mapping out exactly who holds the bag when it comes to keeping an aircraft safely in the sky.
It's easy to just guess, right?
Right.
But today we are looking directly at the actual regulatory architecture of responsibility. So, where should we start?
Well, we should start right at the very foundation. That would be M.A.101, which is titled Scope.
Okay, lay it on me. What does the text actually say?
So it says, and I quote, "This section establishes the measures to ensure the continuing airworthiness of aircraft, including its maintenance, and specifies the conditions for the persons or organizations involved."
Right. So conceptually, what's the underlying philosophy there?
It's all about shifting from seeing airworthiness as just like a single event to seeing it as a permanent state. Airworthiness is this continuous life cycle.
It's not just a plane leaving the factory smelling like fresh paint.
Exactly. It's not a one-time thing. It is the unbroken chain of measures and conditions that keep it safe day in and day out. And crucially, it bounds exactly who must meet those conditions.
So to put that into like a hangar floor reality for you listening, imagine an aviation company is setting up a brand new line maintenance station in Munich.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah, so every single element deployed out there falls under this continuous scope. I mean, the personnel they hire, the specific tooling they calibrate, even the paperwork they file for daily checks.
Right, because you are managing a living life cycle, not just fixing broken parts when they snap.
Exactly. Now, that continuous life cycle obviously requires someone to shoulder the ultimate legal burden, right?
It does. And that brings us straight to M.A.201.A, which is general airworthiness. And honestly, the regulation is extremely clear here.
What's the text say?
It states, "The owner is responsible for continuing airworthiness and shall ensure no flight takes place unless," and then it gives 4 specific pillars.
Okay, what are the 4 pillars?
Number 1, the aircraft is in an airworthy condition. Number 2, equipment is serviceable. Number 3, the airworthiness certificate is valid. And number 4, maintenance complies with the Aircraft Maintenance Program, or AMP.
Okay, hold on. I really need to push back on this a little bit.
Oh, why is that?
Well, that is an incredibly heavy burden to place solely on the owner, especially for like a non-expert. I mean, think about a local dentist who buys a little private Cessna 172 for the weekends.
Right, yeah, a private owner.
They're not an aeronautical engineer. They don't know the first thing about torque values or structural fatigue. So they pay a certified mechanic a lot of money to manage that. But if I am reading this correctly, if they take that plane up and a maintenance task was missed by the mechanic, the dentist is the one violating point A.
Yeah, that is the harsh reality of the regulation. The ultimate legal burden starts and stops with the owner.
Wow. So ignorance is just not an excuse?
Not at all. Ignorance of the aircraft's deep technical state is absolutely not a legal defense. I mean, the owner can delegate the physical tasks to a mechanic, sure, but they can never delegate the legal responsibility for the aircraft's overall status.
Man, that really makes the choice of who you hire to maintain your aircraft incredibly critical.
Absolutely.
But, the commercial aviation world doesn't always operate on simple ownership. I mean, airlines lease aircraft constantly.
They do, and the law fully recognizes that operational reality. If you look at M.A.201.B leased aircraft, it directly addresses this.
What does the quote say?
It says, "Owner responsibilities transfer to the lessee if stipulated on the registration document or leasing contract."
Ah, okay. So the regulation intelligently redirects the accountability to the entity that's actually managing the day-to-day life of the machine. Basically, operational control equals responsibility.
Exactly. It closes a massive loophole, really, because if you didn't have this, airlines could just dodge responsibility by pointing fingers at some shell company that holds the title.
Which we see constantly in corporate finance, right? So imagine a major European cargo operator dry leasing, and by dry leasing I mean they're just leasing the aircraft without the crew. So they're dry leasing a Boeing 767 from a massive financial leasing firm headquartered in Ireland. The cargo operator is flying it, scheduling it, and they are legally listed on the lease and the registration. Therefore, all those continuing airworthiness responsibilities transfer directly to the cargo operator.
Spot on. That Irish leasing firm sitting in a boardroom isn't taking the bullet for a missed inspection. The cargo operator is.
Okay, so we've seen how the macro responsibility for the entire aircraft sits with the owner or the lessee. But you obviously can't run an aviation system without addressing the individuals who are physically spinning the wrenches.
Right, which shifts us down to the hangar floor.
Exactly. So the regulation handles this under M.A.201.c, maintenance performers. The text outlines that, quote, any person or organization performing maintenance is responsible for the tasks performed.
And conceptually, this is strict localized liability.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning that while the owner holds the burden for the whole aircraft, the mechanic holds absolute liability for the specific micro-action they just executed.
Okay, so if a mechanic on the flight line signs off on, say, replacing a main landing gear tire on an Airbus A320, they are legally taking ownership of that exact task.
Exactly. Did they use the right manual revision? Did they torque the bolts correctly? They are not legally certifying that the entire A320 is airworthy.
Right, because that's the owner's job.
Yes. But if that specific tire fails because of poor workmanship, the liability lands directly on that mechanic.
That makes total sense. Now, adjacent to that deep maintenance is the operational readiness check, which brings up M.8.201.d, pre-flight inspection.
Right. And the text there clarifies that, quote, the pilot in command or operator is responsible for the pre-flight inspection. This does not require an approved maintenance organization or certifying staff.
The key distinction you have to keep in mind here is the difference between assessing immediate operational readiness versus performing actual deep maintenance.
Yeah, because the regulation acknowledges that right before a flight, you just need a trained eye to verify the physical state of the aircraft. I mean, you don't need a certified mechanic to tear into the engine cowlings 5 minutes before boarding.
Picture a regional jet captain doing a 6 a.m. walk-around in the freezing rain.
Oh, sounds miserable.
Yeah, it is. But they are checking for visible fluid leaks. They're looking for fresh bird strikes, making sure the pitted tubes are clear. That is a pre-flight inspection.
Right.
They do not need a maintenance license for that because it's a localized operational safety check, and the regulation puts that squarely on the pilot.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about the localized liability of individual mechanics and pilots, but, you cannot run a multi-million-euro airline relying solely on individuals. You need an institutional brain to track the big picture.
Which brings us to the whole airline ecosystem. M.E.201.E, licensed air carriers.
Yes. The text mandates that the operator is responsible for continuing airworthiness, must ensure point A is met, and, here's the key part, must hold or contract approvals for a continuing airworthiness management organization, a CAMO, and a Part 145 maintenance organization.
Okay, so think of the CAMO as the architect and the Part 145 organization as the builder.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, the builder has the hammers, the hangers, and the physical muscle. But they literally cannot drive a single rivet without the blueprints, the tracking software, and the work orders generated by the architect.
Right, and a commercial airline operates at such a massive scale that they are legally forced to have both.
To visualize this for you, think of a mid-sized passenger airline based in Frankfurt. They must have their own internal CAMO department, the architect meticulously tracking flight hours, cycles, and mandatory airworthiness directives handed down by regulators.
Yeah.
Now, they don't necessarily have to own the massive hangars and employ the heavy mechanics themselves. But if they don't have that muscle in-house, they must hold an ironclad written contract with an external Part 145 approved shop to actually execute those heavy checks.
Exactly. But modern aviation often involves massive corporate groups owning multiple airlines, right?
Yeah, mergers everywhere.
Right. So M.A.201.EA and EB, air carrier business groupings, offers a derogation. The text basically says multiple operators in a single grouping may share the same CAMO, provided specific requirements like harmonized management systems are met.
I mean, I can see how that is a massive win for corporate efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Reducing duplicate departments saves a ton of money. But harmonizing two completely different corporate safety cultures sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is a really delicate balance. The regulator is allowing that corporate efficiency, but only on the condition that the safety and management systems are flawlessly synchronized.
Imagine a huge aviation group that owns a passenger airline in Spain and another one in Italy. Instead of paying for two completely separate CAMO departments duplicating the exact same work, they share one centralized CAMO.
Right.
But what happens if the Italian subsidiary runs into deep financial trouble and the authority suddenly revokes their air operator certificate?
That is where point EB comes in. The text says if an AOC is revoked or terminated, the affected carrier must implement an action plan to comply independently as soon as practicable.
So the Spanish airline can't just throw their hands up and say, well, our partner failed, we'll figure it out eventually.
No, absolutely not. They have to immediately present a rapid recovery plan showing the authority exactly how they will spin up their own independent architect. The regulator always demands a safety net.
Okay, let's do a really quick recap before we move into the complexities of different aircraft types.
Sounds good.
We've established that the overarching legal responsibility sits with the owner, or the lessee. We've seen that mechanics hold strict liability for the specific tasks they perform, while pilots handle the operational pre-flight checks. And we explored how licensed airlines must build rigorous CAMO structures, either independently or legally shared within a corporate group.
Perfect summary. And that raises a really interesting question for you to consider. Does an aircraft's commercial status dictate its maintenance rules, or is it something else entirely?
Well, if we look at M.A.101.F, complex motor-powered aircraft used commercially, it seems to answer that.
What does the text say?
It states that the operator must ensure point A is met, and tasks are performed by an approved CAMO, which must be, or contract, a Part 145 approved organization.
Right. The regulation recognizes that commercial operations with complex machinery demand the highest tier of oversight. And this applies even if you aren't selling traditional passenger tickets. We define complex typically as multi-engine turboprops or jets above a certain weight class.
All right, so think of an aerial survey company. They are flying a highly modified, complex twin-turboprop aircraft with heavy scanning equipment. They aren't a traditional airline, but because that machine is complex and performing commercial work, the extreme rigor of a passenger airline is forcefully applied to them.
Exactly. They need the architect and the builder. Now, compare that to M.A.201.G, other complex motor-powered aircraft. This covers private operations.
Okay, what's the rule there?
The text says the owner must ensure point A is met and tasks are performed by an approved CAMO, which must be, or contract, a Part 145 approved organization.
Wait, really? The rules for a private complex aircraft are practically identical to the commercial ones?
Yes, and this reveals the core philosophy of the regulation. The physical complexity of the machine itself dictates the strict rules, even if the operations are purely private. A highly complex aircraft carries inherent public risks that require professional, institutionalized management.
So if a multinational corporation operates a privately owned Gulfstream G650 just to fly their own executives around, they cannot treat it like a weekend hobby plane.
Nope.
They are legally mandated to have a CAMO manage it and a Part 145 shop maintain it, simply because the G650 is a vastly complex piece of engineering.
Exactly. But, the regulations aren't entirely rigid. They do scale down to fit the reality of smaller operations.
Right, which brings us to M.A.201.H, non-complex aircraft for commercial use.
Yes. The quote says the operator must ensure point A is met and tasks are performed by a CAMO or Combined Airworthiness Organization, a CAO.
Introducing the CAO is a massive game changer for smaller operators.
It really is. It provides a streamlined, scalable framework. Because requiring a full-blown airline CAMO for a small, simple aircraft is just regulatory overkill. A CAO legally combines the management paperwork and the physical maintenance privileges into one cohesive business.
A perfect example is a commercial flight school operating a fleet of small, non-complex, single-engine piston airplanes. Under Point H, they can use a CAO to handle both the tracking and the wrench turning, scaling the bureaucracy to match the actual size of their operation.
And that flexibility reaches its absolute peak with M.A.201.I, other non-complex aircraft or limited ops.
So this is for the truly private small stuff, right?
Right. For private owners of simple aircraft, the regulation offers three options. Quote, They can ensure point A is met by either contracting airworthiness tasks to a CAMO or CAO, carrying out the tasks themselves, or carrying out the tasks themselves but contracting the development and approval of the AMP to a CAMO or SEO.
I mean, this gives a little guy maximum flexibility and personal control. They actually trust the private owner of a simple machine to manage their own risk, providing a menu of options based on how much regulatory paperwork they actually want to handle.
Right. Imagine a weekend flyer who owns a small Piper Cub or a two-seat glider. They can completely manage the airworthiness tracking themselves if they're qualified.
Or, if they want to avoid the heavy documentation, they can hire a CAO just to build and approve the maintenance program while they continue to oversee the physical tasks.
It scales perfectly, but regardless of whether you are a weekend flyer or a major airline, the regulator always keeps the keys to the castle.
Oh, always.
Yeah, M.A.101.J, authority access. The, quote, mandates the owner or operator shall grant the competent authority access to any facilities, aircraft, or documents to determine compliance.
And the key concept here is transparency. Historically, operators might have tried to, offshore or subcontract their riskiest maintenance to obscure third parties just to avoid scrutiny.
Exactly. This rule was written specifically to close that loophole. You cannot hide non-compliance behind a third-party vendor.
So the Civil Aviation Authority might decide to audit a major airline.
What?
But instead of showing up at the airline's shiny headquarters,
Yep.
they show up unannounced at a tiny third-party non-destructive testing lab that the airline subcontracted to X-ray their engine mounts. Under Point J, that airline is legally responsible for ensuring the authority is granted full access to that third-party lab.
Which leads us to our final clause, M.A.201.K, AOC aircraft in non-commercial or specialized ops.
What's the text on that one?
It says, the operator shall ensure continuing airworthiness tasks are performed by the AOC holder's applicable CAMO or CAO.
I was actually wondering about this. Why would an airline fly a non-commercial flight, and why does this rule exist to govern it?
Well, it happens quite often for logistical reasons, and the concept here is the unbroken chain.
The unbroken chain.
Yeah. The regulator is basically saying that if an aircraft belongs to an airline's heavily regulated ecosystem, you cannot just turn off the strict CAMO oversight simply because the nature of a specific flight changed for the afternoon.
Oh, okay, that makes total sense. So say an airline takes one of its Boeing 737s completely off the passenger schedule. They are doing an internal non-revenue flight just to transport some staff and spare parts to another base. Even though that specific flight has absolutely no paying passengers, Point K demands that the aircraft remains firmly under the continuous oversight of the main airline's CAMO. The chain of accountability never breaks.
Spot on. So to briefly summarize the second half, we saw that the physical complexity of an aircraft mandates strict CAMO and Part 145 oversight, whether the operation is commercial or private.
Right.
We explored how CAOs provide vital, scalable flexibility for non-complex aircraft. And we finished by cementing the fact that regulators have absolute access to pierce the subcontracting veil, and that an aircraft under an air operator certificate maintains an unbroken chain of oversight regardless of its specific mission that day.
All this talk about strict regulatory boundaries and defining exactly what makes an aircraft complex or non-complex leaves me with a final thought for you to ponder. With aviation technology evolving at breakneck speed into electric vertical takeoff vehicles and highly advanced autonomous drones, how will these rigid definitions have to adapt to assign legal accountability in the very near future? I mean, when the aircraft flies itself and the traditional pilot is removed from the equation entirely, who truly holds the bag?
In the next episode, we will cover GMM.A.201 responsibilities.
Once again, our episodes are up, but remember you can find many more trending topics on our YouTube channel, Phoenix Way Academy. Hope to see you there soon, but for now, take care and goodbye.